Hey guys, welcome to the Console Stackup, where we're taking a look at the Sega Genesis. Last time, we took a look at the hardware specs and some of the outstanding titles. Today, however, we're looking at the sales, marketing, and legal ramifications that the system had. As such, this video will be broken down into 3 parts. First, let's take a look to see how this console touched the hearts of millions and how it stuck it to the man. So, it's going to be hard talking about this system without also talking about Nintendo as a counter perspective. So let's get a few details out of the way first. First, 1983 saw a video game market crash whereby a $3.4 billion industry shrank by 90%. Second, Nintendo took a risk and released a console in 1985, which was a massive success and single-handedly revived the home console market from demise. And third, by 1990, Nintendo owned 90% of the market share and was seen as the monopolistic leader.
Here we go!
Ugh. I really want to talk a little more in depth about Nintendo. But this video is already jam-packed with information, so we're going to have to save it for another time. But at least you have the basics. Nintendo stole an unsuspecting market and assumed the role of eternal console king. That is until another Japanese console manufacturer entered the scene. 1989 saw the release of the Sega Genesis, and in order to compete with Nintendo the Goliath, they set out on what has been popularly known as the Gillette method. In the shaving industry, it is popular to now get razor handles at exorbitantly low prices, nearly to the point where the manufacturer isn't even making any money. But, as our wallets know, you make up for it by charging a premium on razor blades. So it was for the Genesis. They would follow this methodology. They would charge low prices for the console, and in turn, yield higher profit margins on each game sold. This is something that hasn't been done before. In a few short years, the Genesis would drastically change the landscape, starting a price war and initiating the first ever console war. The original Genesis price was $189.99 and was packaged with Altered Beast. A relatively fun game, but nothing compared to the incredible titles on Nintendo's console. Mind you that the Genesis was now out as a 16-bit console, while Nintendo still had their dingy 8-bit toy.
Mamma mia!
It would take until fall of 1991 for Nintendo to release their Super Nintendo, but Sega was already all over it. In summer of 91, Genesis further reduced the price to $149.99 in order to bolster sales and try to grasp the marketplace. And by the time that the Super Nintendo was released in 1991, which sold for $199.99 with 12 games, the Genesis had already been out for 2 years and seen a 25% price drop and boasted over 150 titles. Things were starting to change for Sega. Prior to the Genesis being released, Sega only had around 10% of the market share. By the time the Super Nintendo was out, Sega had risen to claim 25% of the market. But it wouldn't stop here. By year's end, in 1991, the Super Nintendo had sold 1.4 million consoles in a 3-month period, while the Genesis, with its 2 years of momentum, had been able to sell 1.6 million. And mind you, that was a 12-month period. Though it seems a little unfair, Sega was the dominating player and console manufacturer and boasted this proudly. In 1992, Nintendo had been shook by this turn of fortune and opted to reduce price routinely, something they had never done before. But every price cut of theirs was met with an equal strategy by Sega. When Nintendo dropped their price from $199 to $179, Sega included a free game of choice. When Nintendo then dropped the price from $179 to $149, Sega dropped theirs from $149 to $129. And finally, when Super Nintendo was just fed up with it all, they did their biggest drop from $149 to $99, which Sega mimicked equally. Within 1 year, the Super Nintendo had dropped its price by 50% of its original MSRP, all because of a price war with Sega. Sega's overall market share was catching up. And in 1993, through a series of intensive marketing ads and spectacular game launches, Sega had officially overtaken Nintendo in terms of market share and became the market leader through 1993 and 1994. These videos, while entertaining, may be a little dry at times. So, here's the first ever fun fact. When registering the trademark on Sonic the Hedgehog's name, they put "the" as Sonic's legal middle name. Couple of final points to make in sales before we move on. First, we established that console manufacturers make most of their money on game sales, which are either made in-house or by third-party developers. But who pays for the manufacturing of the cartridges? Well, Nintendo would charge $15 per game to be compatible with their system, and if that wasn't enough, they made each developer pay for the manufacturing themselves. Sega, on the other hand, would only charge $10, and in EA's case, they would only charge $4 and would oftentimes help with the manufacturing. This was an attempt to bring over third-party support to Sega, which they had very little of. This was a dangerous move, as Nintendo, being the dominant force in the market, could simply drop any developer they chose, so the deal had to be lucrative for the devs. Second, let's just take a step back and really look at these prices. $199.99, $149.99? Boy, the good old days were sure grand with these consoles being so cheap, huh? No $300 price point here. Wrong, my fellow gamers. Let's take a trip to Inflation Lane. We can really see what the prices were at the time. At the release of the Sega Genesis in 1989, they were asking for $189, which seems reasonable by today's standards, but if we include inflation, we get to see what it actually is. We see that it's actually closer to 367 buckaroos. Not so cheap now, is it? A mere 2 years later, and the Super Nintendo releases for $10 more at $199. But thanks to inflation, it was actually cheaper by today's standards, coming out at $352. That's right, in a mere 2 years, while the price of the Super Nintendo had increased $10, inflation sought to increase itself by 10%, making a seemingly more expensive product actually weigh lighter on your pockets. George Bush, what were you doing? Wait, not this Bush. No, not that one. This one. Anyway, by 1993, when both consoles were at a low of $99, the current inflated price would have been around $160. Not too shabby, eh? Third, you know how Nintendo always seems to understock their products? Whether it be Amiibos, the NES Classic, or just any special thing ever. It seems like a modern thing, but it really isn't that bad of an idea. Limiting a run does a few important things. First, it allows you to ensure that you sell all your products without leaving any leftover inventory. Secondly, it also drives consumer demand. By purposely supplying less than the demanded, it drives consumers mad, making them want more, and creates a buzz around the product in terms of free marketing. Hey, you know that new toy? There are only so many of them. So people line up, go mad, start fights, just do whatever it takes. And the media eats this up. However, the downsides to limiting a run hurts the image of the company and limits the potential profits in the long run. So the trade-offs are pretty fair. Now, you may think this is a relatively new notion Nintendo is employing. Wrong again, my fellow nerds. Prior to the 1991 release of the Super Nintendo, they had sold 1.5 million pre-orders in the USA and knew that the demand would exceed 1 million. However, despite knowing this, they only planned to ship 300,000 units within the first month and stagnant releases throughout the rest of the year. So their plan to underproduce was put into practice literally decades ago. Lastly, the thorn that Sega, into Nintendo's side, was their incredible marketing budget. Perhaps the console wasn't as powerful as the Super Nintendo, but the $60 million yearly marketing budget from 1990 to 1993 is what made the Genesis the market leader. So, what marketing techniques did Sega use? To get the answers to these questions and more, you'll have to wait, because this marks the end of the sales breakdown for the Sega Genesis. So stay tuned for later this week when I release the marketing portion. As always, leave your comments in the comments below.